Actually, I think that would be helpful. So James just texted me. James, do you want to come off mute? So James is a current client. And he says in his text, as someone who signed with you exactly as these coaches want clients to do with them, would it be helpful to share a bit of my story?
I was actually hoping for that. So yes,
Oh,
please.
you were? Okay.
I was
James,
like,
we are a big yes to you sharing. Thank you.
Great. And hey, Demi, it's great to see you again. We met up in Connor back in November, the same time I met Pam. Don't know if you recall.
Yeah, yes, James. I'm looking for your face. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. So Pam had mentioned to me I was up doing the second half of our intensive work, kind of the 6-month follow-up. I don't know, last week. I lose track of time. But she had mentioned that you two were in conversation about doing this. And I said, oh, I want to be a part of that. So I got the link and signed up, and it's great to be here. So my story is I am an entrepreneur. I work in the tech field. I've had a short stint in corporate for 4 or 5 years, but mostly I've lived my career building tech businesses. I've had some success, I've had some failure. I guess more recently I had a bit of success. And I had been reflecting a lot on what I wanted from my life. And I got pulled into, I don't know this group, and if you folks are followers, adherents of the three principles philosophies, but I went to check that out, and that's where I met Demi and Pam. And I had been really wrestling with the fact that I didn't want to keep serving the world just by building tech companies that made people money, but didn't really accomplish much for humanity. My passion was really in, because I was so connected to the issue of what it's like to build a company as a startup founder, I'm quite drawn to the idea of how to help founders and how to help. I'll also just say how to help middle-aged men find fulfillment is an interesting topic to me as well. So I had really been thinking about, I want to make a transition out of the company that I run and into doing coaching as a primary vocation. And it was a loosely formed idea, but one that every time I sat with it, it just pulled me closer. And one day I was up in Connor, Washington at a Three Principles retreat where I met Demi and Pam. I think I just sat next to Pam. I thought, oh, she looks fun. This I don't know what I'm in store for in this room, but she looks fun. I'll sit beside her. We had a little bit of chat and hit it off. The seminar evolves. A lunch break came. I think we had chatted a little, and I said, hey, do you want to grab lunch? And we did. And we were just in conversation. And it was very much, as I recall it, Pam, just a give and take, back and forth conversation between two budding friends. And she said something that resonated so incredibly powerfully for me. Something to the effect, and Pam, you might recall it a little better than me, but we're talking about your calendar, and you said something about, oh, I was looking at my calendar and I was so excited about the people that I get to meet with tomorrow. And that was both, is there an emoji for a gut punch and an enlightenment moment? Because it was both of those things. It felt fucking terrible given the feeling that I felt about the things I needed to be multitasking on while I was away at the seminar. But then I could tell that it was delivered with such joyous authenticity that it was also a North Star, that I thought, I want to follow this North Star and see where it goes. So, we chatted a little bit more at lunch, but then we went our separate ways. And a day or two later, I ran into her and I said, I'd really like to chat a little bit more about that. Now, we had a little bit more follow-up conversation. I think that when that retreat ended and we ended up having a more, what would probably classically be called sort of a discovery call, where the focus now is more specifically, we're not just here to chat as friends, we're here to chat about what would it be like to work together. At that point, I would say that I was coming from a place where going into that discovery call, I had clearly seen credibility with Pam, right? I had had enough interaction that I knew she was no bullshit. I knew that she had something that I wanted. I knew that she was a path to a version of the future that I was clear enough on that I wanted access to. And I was not new to coaches. I've worked with classic executive coaches, nothing to do with life coaching or three principles, just, business, team, efficiency, effectiveness, etc. I had done that thing. I knew that model. I had worked with a career coach who came from the three principles model. So I had experience with coaching. I want to put that out there because I didn't have the risk of, I don't even know what this coaching thing is. But we got into the discovery call, and I see why Demi holds you in this regard, Pam, because you're masterful at evolving something that feels like the best, most useful friend you ever had, chatting in a heartfelt way, into what it would look like to work together. And I really think that is the pivot. I've been listening to a lot of Steve Chandler stuff lately as well. And that's the thing that you did effortlessly. And the conversation from that point forward was no longer, I want to see what I can extract from you. I was never trying to extract anything from you, but it was no longer just, what can I take from all this free dialogue? It was now in the, okay, if we're going to continue this conversation, this is what it would look like. She did not, I'm not going to speak numbers, but she did not give a price or anything. She said, let me give it some thought and send you a proposal. And she did. And I opened the proposal, I don't know, 48, 72 hours later. And, it was not long. I think, what was it, a 2-page proposal with lots of white space. So it was really just a reiteration that she truly did hear everything I had said. Nothing was canned. And because I had given you sort of 3 pillars that were important to me, that because I, as a client thinking about doing this, had sat back and said, what would I want out of this? Because I'll also say some of the coaching that I've had before felt a little aimless, and it felt supportive, but not impactful. So I thought, what would I really want? And I had articulated that to Pam, and you mirrored it back to me. And you did it in a way where it was credible. It wasn't a stretch at all for me to see how that reality could happen, right? It wasn't like, oh, yeah, sure, of course. Wouldn't we all like that? Like, yeah, I could see that. And then you put a little bit of structure, and then you also put a price. And I kind of threw up a little in my mouth when I saw the price, to be honest. Never in a million years would I have, I guess it was probably double the high end of what I thought to expect. And it's funny because I was down in Palm Springs at a friend of mine's place, and we were kind of doing our own thing, and I made an audible sound, and she says, what's that all about? And then I kind of brought her into the loop of what I'm thinking about. And she was a little surprised. And then she said, well, how are you feeling? And I said, well, it's not a no. And so I sat with that for a little bit, and I sat with not a no. The number is way bigger than I had any intention of spending, but it's not a no. Why is it not a no? I'd say I sat with that question of why. I was genuinely curious, because I'm the kind of guy who, if I feel a little offended by something, you're kind of dead to me. now I'm growing as a human, and I'm a little better than that today, but that's probably because of working with Pam. So before working with Pam, I had to sit with that. And where I kept coming back to is I want more out of my life than I am living. And my decision was mostly for her to help me professionally into the transition into coaching, but not only. I have two young kids. They're not the easiest children. I'm married. Anyone who's married knows that you can always use a coach. So I had all this stuff going on, and I basically just looked and said, I believe my life will be a lot better with Pam in it. And so at this point, I was no longer weighing her number against my previous expectation of a number. Now I was starting to weigh the number against, what's it look like if I don't do this? Like, what is more of the same? And if not this, what? Because I don't want more of the same. And again, it hinged incredibly on total confidence and credibility in Pam. And so I think you pinged me after a couple of days because I went a little bit radio silent while I sat with it. Your inquiry, as I recall it, was just, hey, is there anything do you want to chat about the proposal? There was never a sniff of neediness. There was just a sense of, well, of course she's going to follow up. I mean, be irresponsible not to. And then we had a chat, and I kept thinking, like, I'm a negotiator, right? I've run multiple businesses. I don't not negotiate. But I thought about it, and I thought, no, that's not the nature of the relationship I want to build here. I would rather say, excuse my language, but the bar is really fucking high, Pam. Like, I'm after something impactful here. And I don't think you were shy about that challenge at all. And we didn't even talk for long in that conversation, as I recall. It wasn't like, oh, you need to really convince me. Like, it was none of that. It was just, let me just check in with my gut because I think I'm now a yes. I was like, yeah, I'm a yes. And then we went from there. So hopefully that's helpful, a little bit of a view in the mind of someone who never thought he'd write that check.
James, a lot of that I'm hearing for the first time.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
That was really cool for me to hear that. I'm curious about what you all, as you're listening to James, like, what do you hear in that sort of piques your interest? And, Demi, I'm wondering if we just have people take themselves off mute to share. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe raise your virtual hand just so we don't have a bunch of people talking over each other and then
nice.
call on you. And yeah, and I love this, James. I think it's because it is such a rare opportunity to get to hear the backside story of it. And especially, it's one of the things I've been trying to parlay to our, the members in the gym is there's something so beautiful and effortless in how you've done it. And this story of James, I've heard many other stories like this. And they just really stand out and strike me. And that's really where it inspired the gym, is that, I know that all of us have our own version of Pam inside of us. Like, this is not, Pam is not special in this. This is all of our innateness. And it's, not a Pam version of ourselves, but just being ourselves as so, I don't know, just as so freely as you are. That we all have that version in us. And
hi, Pam. Yeah, Demi just said it. It was pure effortless. There wasn't any of this neediness. And what came to me is, I'm going to say it came from a place of service and love. The conversation we had with James. And another thing what James said, the bar was high. When he heard saw the money, it was like, holy shit. But one of the things that I know is for there to be effective coaching, there has to be that point of that holy shit, whether it be the money or something.
Mm. Yeah, for me, I don't have like a set number, like when I'm actually it hadn't occurred to me that I would coach James when I met him in Lacona, in fact, James, when you said to me, can we talk about working together? I was like, oh, in what way? It hadn't actually occurred to me up until that point. And then I was like, oh, it would be really cool to coach James. Like, what? That would be amazing. Right. And then I started to sort of sit with the idea. And, one of the things, and I saw it in the chat, that it sounds like it was coming from love, because it always is with me. So I was asked by a team leader who I work with a lot in a big organization. He said, I want to tell my boss about you, and I don't know how to talk about what you do. What do you do? He said, I know it's effective, but what is it? And I said, he said, when you work with a team, what are you doing with the team? And I turned around and I said, I love them. And he said, I can't say that. He's an VP, he's not going to go. I can't just say, he said, I can, he said, but I feel that love. Right. And I mean, even the other day, I was in a conversation with a group of leaders, and we had a whole conversation about love and leadership. And I mean, I was just like tingling with like, wow, this is like all of my dreams come true, because what is leadership if it's not love? What is coaching if it's not love? Right? Like, and so just being in it with another human, even in the idea of us working together in this juicy thing we call coaching, I'm just sitting in it with the potential client with, is this a good idea in our field? Right? Like, let's play with the idea of us working together. Now, for me, I like very high flame coaching, very intensive, so you're gonna know I'm in your life. I mean, it's kind of like, James, you might have felt this, but one client described it like, I feel like you've camped out in my front yard, Pam. And every time I kind of open the curtains, there's like Pam going, hello. So I only work with a few clients because I like to really be in, and with them and what's going on. And like, other coaches don't love that kind of intensity, and that's great. But for me, that's kind of where I get to sort of bring it and love the most. And I do fall in love with my clients, and I talk a lot about love. Even with very senior leaders who at the beginning are like, are we going to talk about this? I have found, I mean, I've got clients, the number of clients I've got from, sitting beside someone on a plane, grocery store, just, I mean, and a lot of referral, right? Because if you coach in, and it's one of the reasons why I want it to be kind of intensive, because I said to James, I probably didn't say this to you at the beginning, James, but I think partway in, I said, what I'm looking for is a top 5 life experience for them. I mean, that's the bar I want. I mean, really, I kind of want it to be top 3, if I'm honest. Right. And I'm constantly in the engagement, curious about whether we're getting there, right? And if we're not, it's on me to create the conditions for that to happen. It's not all on me. I'm not like taking on the work of the client. And that is something I see a lot of coaches do, is they just take on too much of the heavy lifting. And it's all done in a very well-meaning way, but it's not in service to the client. James, how am I doing on the top 5 life experience?
Well, we're certainly cracked through the top 10, Pam, and we're coming around the corner. Um, no, I mean, when you said that to me, that was a really interesting moment for me because it really, I guess it was a moment of alignment, right? Because without ever using those words, I wanted that. And then when you stated it, it was like, yeah, that's right. That's what we're doing here. And I also think it forces, along with the nature of the work that you do, it forces a reconciliation with what your initial objectives were. Like, I think you said something, and it might be worth you commenting on this, that like the engagement is almost never about what the client thought the engagement was going to be about. Like, I think I'm tracking well on the things that I very clearly articulated I want to make progress in, but that wasn't the work, you know? And so if I use that lens, I mean, I wouldn't really use that lens. I'd use the lens of who am I and
Mm,
who was I before?
nice. Oh, yeah.
Like there's a
That's
chance, Pam, there's an
fascinating.
outside chance that I might take my headphones off on an airplane now.
I love it. That's so cool. When I start a discovery call, I'll often say, one of 3 things could happen. Depends how the person's come into me. Like with James, I knew I already wanted to coach with him if he was up for it, right?
Mm.
But like if it's somebody I don't know, then I'll start with one of 3 things can happen. We might have this conversation and that might be enough. I might refer. Or it might seem for both of us that there could be a fit about us talking about working together. But I'm really not attached to which 3 of those outcomes happen. And so, if I get, partway through the call and I'm really getting that sense that this is just not a fit, then I'll often call it early, you know? And I'm really thoughtful about referrals. I just want people to be served. I want, the best fit for them and for the other coaches and practitioners that I refer to. I just see it all as an ecosystem, and we're just going to find our people. And so, yeah, it's just, to me, it feels like playful in a game, like, oh, we get to sort of play in the sandpit together and see if, there's a potential that we want another play date. Oh, okay, great, there is a potential, or not so much for me. I don't really like the way you mess with the sand over there. And, and certainly for me, like, I don't do well with a client that isn't really up to much in life. Right? Like I kind of get bored by that. If somebody comes and says, they want help working out more, I'm like, really? And one of
Yeah.
the things I'll do is I'm looking to help them find the spark. So when clients first come, I find that often what they say they want is, kind of not really all that exciting to them when you really press them. But can I help them find in that discovery call where the spark is? So I definitely take what they first say to me at face value, and then I'm probing and looking for what really does light them up. Where is that spark? And then am I interested in what they're interested in? Like, with James, I was like, wow, I mean, basically we're helping founders who are basically changing the world not be jerks. Yeah, I can get behind that. If I can help somebody who's helping that happen in the world, that was really cool to me. So I have to have a little bit of spark about their spark. But not all coaches do. But I think this is one of the reasons why when I contract with teams, and this is, learned from not doing it originally this way. So I so get, why we find ourselves, because when you think about it, it's weird enough in this human experience that we try and coach one other weird human, right? Like that's the weird enough. But then when we're trying to do it with multiple in a team, that have some organizational structure around them and a system and some politics and, all of the other stuff that comes in, right, all bets are off. So one of the things I've learned with teams is I do a very slow intake where I will actually make a proposal where it's often 3 blocks. I do an intake, I do an implementation phase, and then I have an accelerate phase, which is where I help them do it without me, right? Well, I have an exit clause at the end of phase 1. And I exercised it a few months ago. So I was working with this team and I did the intake, which is one-on-one interviews with everybody on the team. And then I did a couple of, I did a leadership team half day and then a little bit of extra time with the CEO. And we got to the end of the phase 1 engagement and I exited. I said, the CEO is not on board and I'm out. And I had this excruciating Zoom call with an HR director who was in tears and the president of the company who was so angry with me. He was shouting at me. The most excruciating Zoom call where I am exiting and, it's not going down well that I'm going to exit. And at one point, the president said to me, you're just going to turn around and leave like 70K on the table. And I said, yes. Because I know that it wouldn't be of service to that organization to try and do any kind of engagement where we're trying to do something around culture when the CEO isn't on board and he's just phoning it in. And I don't want to be party to that, right? Like I'm not interested. And it's actually, I kept being reminded, even though the Zoom call was excruciating, I kept being reminded that this is the highest service I could be in for this organization and for this HR director and for this president is to walk away. Right? Like as hard as it is, and, I went for a long walk. I did a lot of, deep breaths afterwards because it was a rough call. But wow, am I glad I did it, right?
Yeah.
I do fire clients who, who aren't showing up, and haven't, aren't doing what we said we were going to do together. I'm just not interested in playing the contract out. That's just not why I'm in the game.
The feeling that you generated in me and probably most of the other audience as you're walking through the love that you're experiencing and sharing was what so many people seek. They just want to experience a version of that. And so when you're talking about sitting in the field with someone, you just did that. And when we can do that with our clients, they feel it and they crave it.
Oh, yes. Oh, Andrew, I love that. They do crave it. And we know it, don't we? Like it's a place, it's this familiar place, but such a soft place to land.
Yeah, they know it. Like it's home. Yeah.
It's home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second observation was as James was going through, he mentioned something that I think helps most people make a decision to engage with coaches. He mentioned something along, I could see a future path with you. And that one just stood out because in the buying decision that somebody's going through, what you're really selling them is the future version of them. And
Yeah.
if you can give them that top 5 experience, why it becomes a top 5 experience of their life, they have stepped into becoming that new version that they were craving as well.
Mm. And they already are it. Like all we're doing in coaching, I feel like, is we're having them know what they already know, having them see the value of knowing it. I mean, constantly, if you look at the origins of the words to educate, it is to draw out. And for me, all I'm doing is I'm just pulling on the threads that they give me. And if I don't find a juicy enough thread, I just keep going until we do. Right. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, this one's got some. Yeah. And I'm just drawing out what's already there rather than trying to pour in. I think that's another thing I see a lot of coaches do, is that I so get it. You know, it looks like we need to add value, so we need to put more stuff in. Right. We need to teach them, right? Tell them. And I find that the less of me that's in there, the better. But they think it's me. Like constantly clients are saying, you know, that was just brilliant what you came up with last session. And I'm like, no, you came up with that.
Yeah.
That was all you. And
Right.
who
Yeah.
am I to not offer it? Right? Like, what? I should just leave people in their default mode, getting more of what they don't want because I don't want to raise the money question. I see money as energy. It wants to flow. It requires movement. And all we're doing is a fair exchange of value. Right? That's all we're doing when we bring money into the equation of coaching. And money is very helpful in the equation of coaching. It clarifies a lot. It's a helpful support system to the work that we're doing. Right. And so to me, my fees aren't high, even though they're probably, if you compare them to most other coaches, you know, they're probably on the high end, but they're not high fees. They're a fair fee for the value that the client is getting.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm not nervous about talking about money because I haven't made up stuff about money that isn't true.
Pam, can I comment just a little bit on that transition from new friends chatting? So there was a logical decision point around, is there a continuation of this conversation, right? We chatted in La Conner, and then that was winding up.
Mm-hmm.
So then what? And you, I think, very rightly put a little bit of a frame around it. I don't even remember what you said, but you know, hey, you know, would you like to continue this conversation of what it might look like to work together? Those probably weren't the words, but that was the sentiment.
Yeah.
At that point, I was under no illusion that that's just two friends chatting over Zoom when we get home, right? So it has now taken on a new frame. And I think that it's important. It would seem to me that that shift from, would you like to continue more of what we're doing, this
Yeah.
is what it could look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I don't think we need to feel like we've moved the conversation into some scary place. Like you're just exploring. Like if it feels like that's the place to go, then why wouldn't you just throw that out there and see how it goes? You know, I recently just got a client from somebody I met for 15 minutes at a New Year's Eve party. in a kitchen. And she was quite drunk at the time. And she,
Pam.
I know. She reached out to me the next day, and she had contacted the guy who had run the party, you know, who'd organized the party, because I was only at the party for half an hour, long story. And she reached out to the guy who'd set it up and asked for my contact information. And she reached out to me, and something I had said to her about leadership, which is that you always need to build receptivity first. And I think this gets missed, by the way, with coaching. I think it gets missed in leadership, and we just assume that receptivity is there for what we're trying to do with someone. And I never assume that, you know, even like, and James, I love that you're letting us spotlight on you and our engagement, but like with James, I knew there was a bigger game in town than the one that he was coming to me with, but I had to build receptivity for that before we went there. I didn't start with, hey, James, I know you're coming for A. I actually think it's much more about B,
Yeah.
right? Because he wasn't receptive to that at that point. And so I built the receptivity to go there, right? And receptivity is something I really wish there could be more time spent in coach training and in facilitation and leadership and all those things. But somehow she and I got into a conversation. I mentioned receptivity, and she had a light bulb moment. And she was like, I have to talk to that woman I met. And she didn't even remember my name. She's trying to explain to the guy she had blue hair. You know, I need her number, right? Right. So then we have a cup, you know, we go out for coffee. Turns out she's a leader and she's really struggling. And so now we're about to start a coaching engagement. You know, it's been a few months of us having a few calls and just sort of seeing whether or not there's a good fit. Right. And now we're going to start a coaching engagement, and she's decided to pay for it personally, because just in our conversations, she's realized that she probably wants to leave the organization just through the discovery.
James, I'll have to share with you my story of hiring Pam sometime, because it was similar. I met her in a program, but we were partnered. And by the way, Pam, you may not know this, but I asked Michael Neal, since I was apprenticing with him, I'm like, can I have Pam first? I asked her, like, I secretly asked to be paired with you.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I know. And but she's telling me stories about how she's becoming very clever these days and very creative at turning clients down. And I already know I'm thinking about, man, I really like to work with her. And so I'm a little bit sweating over here, you know, like, how am I going to get her? You know, so you're the first coach that I've ever hired that I feel like I actually had to work as deliberately at getting you to say yes to me as I would just in the client creation process. So, yeah. And I know how selective you are. And I've also, you know, had the privilege of just being friends with you. And that's one of the things I really want to point out too that's so beautiful is you notice Pam and James's dynamic and mine and Pam's dynamic. I mean, these are just you can barely tell the cross-reference between client and friend, but we're very clear. Both James and I are very clear on, you know, and there's still, you know, I still see future contracting possibilities for Pam and I, and maybe my husband. And so that's still very much in the field of awareness for me. But I have wanted for myself and for all coaches to have an experience of Pam in the way that I have, that has really influenced me and shown me this new possibility of ease and playfulness and love, like more of that. And so I've been planting seeds. She doesn't know this, but I've been planting these seeds for many years, because it's like, Pam, there's only one of you.
And I'm lazy.
And she's lazy. You're really cool to, and there's so many organizations and leaders that need help right now.